Welcome to another exciting episode of Submission Radio. We are back. We are back after a bit of a layoff. Me, Kasper Rozalowski. I'm, of course, Dennis Skradov. We were over enjoying the slopes, enjoying the good people over in New Zealand. You know, one of the best neighbors anyone could ask. They're the Flanders to our Simpsons. They're the Mr. Wilsons to our Dennis the Menace. There are any other good neighbors that we could come up with?
I don't know too many, but let's say that dude in Home Improvement who's always over the fence and you never see his face. But we did see New Zealand, absolutely beautiful views, beautiful snowboarding down there. Submission Radio really treated like kings, and we love all the Kiwis, we love the New Zealand people. So a big thank you. But of course, we are back. We're back in town, back in your lives, doing the interviews, and today's going to be no different. We've got a lot of big guests on this show. Dennis, tell the people who we have in store for them.
Well, first of all, let's talk about great names. There's a lot out there. Winston Churchill, Barack Obama, that's a great name. Zach Galifianakis rolls off your tongue. But no name out there in my professional experience have I seen that's quite as sharp as Dennis. Now, I know my name is Dennis, but we've got another Dennis on the show today. And I don't know if two Dennises make a ride, but we've got Dennis Bermudez. He's going to be on the show. He's got long hair. We're going to talk about hair tips. Maybe we'll talk about his fight. Who knows? No, we'll talk about his fight. A great guy, and a good friend of Pat Cummins, who's one of our favorite guys in MMA as well. So it's going to be an exciting chat. So we're very excited to have Dennis, and then we've also got Cass.
The Ranger himself. We've got none other than Tim Kennedy. Tim Kennedy is going to be on the show talking about all sorts of things. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about with him. I want to ask him about Vitor Belfort and obviously his fight coming up against Yoel Romero. And then we've got another big name. We've obviously got the Demolition Man, the Reem, whatever you want to call him. Alistair Overeem will be on the show today on Submission Radio. And we've got a lot to talk about with him as well.
Yeah, that's right. There's been some photos coming out about Alistair, where he looks a little bit skinny. And there's a few guys on the internet, more than a few guys, a lot of MMA fans discussing, is this man going back down to the light heavyweight division? They talk about it. They've asked each other. They've posted some pictures, some comments. A couple of people are staying up all night long trying to research this. So we thought, hey, we'll get Alistair on the show. We'll talk about that, a whole array of other subjects, including his fight with Mr. Ben Rothwell himself. And, Kasper, Ben Rothwell is an original hipster. Do you know why?
I have no idea why.
He's the only guy that wears a thick sweater into the ring and doesn't take it off for the whole fight.
Classic hipster right there. Speaking of a guy who does not need a sweater in the ring, we've got some awesome fighters coming down to Australia, to the motherland, and none other than Diego Sanchez. So for all you Aussies who are excited about coming down, meeting fighters, doing things like that, Diego Sanchez is coming down to the country. He's being brought down courtesy of our good friends, everythingmma.com. Dennis, tell the good people a little bit more about this.
Well, that's exactly right. EverythingMMA.com, they actually brought down Alistair Overeem last year. They're a great company. They're a great bunch of guys. And for all our listeners here in Australia, they really do put on a great seminar. Like Kasper mentioned, www.everythingmma.com.au, bringing down Diego Sanchez. He's only coming to Perth and Melbourne, so other people are going to have to travel to here or there. And I suggest coming to Melbourne over Perth. No, I'm kidding. We love Perth. They have a lot of great things there. And it's going to be in August. It's going to be the 15th and 17th. Now, there's going to be different packages available. You can even have a sneaky dinner with Diego and discuss various things with him. Dinner with Diego Sanchez. I wonder what he orders for an entree.
Yeah, I wonder if he's as intense at dinner as he's in the ring. I wonder if he sort of builds his way up through the entree, comes in strong in the main, and then really finishes strong during dessert.
I wonder when he orders a steak, does he go for medium rare or just rare? Because there's a lot of blood.
I wonder if when the food comes out, does he chant yes and do a cartwheel?
I wonder that. Anyway, we could be going on for hours and hours, but basically, you guys will get an opportunity to find out all of his training secrets. Now, Diego Sanchez comes from one of the greatest camps in MMA, Jackson Winkeljohn's. Obviously, Coach Wink is a part of the Submission Radio family. We love to have him on the show. He's been on a number of times. And today we've got Tim Kennedy and Alistair Overeem on the show. So that just shows you, they're just a great camp. And there's a lot of secrets there. There's a lot of, Greg Jackson, he's a great guy, but he's got a lot of secrets, Cass, right?
He's a mysterious man. He's an enigma wrapped in a riddle.
Is he the Batman of MMA? Like, if you expect for someone to be Batman, do you think like it would make sense for Greg Jackson to possibly be Batman?
It would either be Greg Jackson or John Dodson. That's all I have to say.
That's true. See, I always thought yeah, I thought John Dodson was more of a Flash guy.
Yeah,
But then,
yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
but I could see both of them in kick ass. No, I'm kidding. So yeah, he's going to be in the country. Everythingmma.com.au. Pop on there, grab some tickets, and check them out. They're a great guy. They're great guys. And when they brought down Overeem last time, we had a really good time. So always appreciate it whenever someone brings someone down under. We're not the closest country in the world, but there's a lot of fun things to do here. So people should definitely come on down.
And just quickly, we've got Dennis Bermudez on the line, but just before we get him out, just some housekeeping. Obviously, you can follow us at Twitter at Submission AUS, that's Submission Oz. Check out our Facebook, facebook.com/Submission Radio AUS. And something fun that we're doing with our Facebook, we're getting all the fans involved, we're getting yourself involved, and all our guests. So what we're going to do is basically add important moments and dates to our timeline. So just a couple of guys, obviously, with Tim Kennedy, Dennis Bermudez, all our guests, we're going to get their moments, add them to our timeline. It could be a big win in their career. It could be their pro debut, whatever the case is. With our fans, we want to get yours as well. It could be a date where you got into MMA. It could be where you had your first BJJ class, your first kickboxing class, the day you had an awesome party and had a UFC pay-per-view at your house. If you're an amateur fighter or a lesser-known pro fighter, send all your moments into submissionradioaustralia@gmail.com, and we want to add your moments and forever be part of that timeline.
That's right, guys. So the Submission Radio timeline now, you become a part of it. And as Casper mentioned, send through all of your best times. For example, a good time would be maybe the first time you ever watched a UFC event, or the first time you did a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class. We take it all in, and it's facebook.com, as Casper mentioned, /Submission Radio AUS. You become a part of the timeline and a part of the Submission Radio family. We treat our family good and provide dinners whenever you guys come to town.
Absolutely.
If you can find us.
Speaking of family, our next guest is waiting on the line, and we're about to have him on.
That's right. So we're excited to have a guy with a great name and a great attitude. Cass, let us know who's on the show.
All right, guys, our next guest is the Ultimate Fighter 14 runner-up. He is the Submission of the Night winner. He is a two-time Fight of the Night winner. He is the Performance of the Night winner. And he's got a nice little 6-fight win streak in the featherweight division. He is none other than Dennis Bermudez. Dennis, welcome to Submission Radio.
Thanks for having me, guys.
It is our absolute pleasure. Now, let's kick this off. You've got a big fight coming up against Clay Guida on July 26th at UFC on Fox 12 in the Sap Center, San Jose, California. Now, you're on this big 6-fight win streak in the tough featherweight division. You're stepping up against Clay. How's training been going so far, and are you prepared?
Training's going awesome, man. I hit like some new PRs and stuff like that in my weight training, and I've just been feeling phenomenal. We made some adjustments for my last fight camp in terms of controlling my volume and just making it a little bit lower. And then from that fight, we then made some adjustments off of that, just adding in some more sprints and stuff like that, just making my cardio a little better. So the best Bermudez yet.
Now, Dennis, before I jump into the next question, I must say that first name you've got there, and it's a great name, and just to let you know, it's just a very sexy name as well. But getting back to the interview, Clay Guida, he's a big step up in competition. He's obviously an idol for a lot of MMA fans. Give us the important goss. Did you get someone in the gym to put on a crazy wig and mosh around in the ring to recreate his movements?
When I've been sparring, if my sparring partner can help it and can duplicate a Clay Guida look, I ask for it when I'm sparring. Hey man, can you just move around a little more and just be a little more up and down, and so I've had some good partners that were able to duplicate that, and then I had some others that weren't as good.
Yeah, I mean, if they can't do it, you could just go down to a heavy rock concert. I think there should be a few guys in the mosh pit there that could do it for you.
Yeah, it's been tough. Some guys, like I was working out with Eric Perez a little bit. He was actually doing a really good job doing the Clay Guida. But between my pressure and keeping up that movement, he got tired in the second round. I was like, oh man, I'm really having trouble keeping this up. Between your pressure and
Yeah. Now, as far as, you said you changed a few things. What's the biggest thing you've worked on for a guy like, a veteran like Clay Guida, and what's something that you feel that you can exploit about his style?
I mean, realistically, I didn't really change too much. Just, making my punching sharper. And I've always had great cardio, but we just, nipped it in the butt a little bit more. I mean, those are really the only two adjustments.
Oh, great, Dennis. Now, let's talk about Clay Guida and what he means to you. Obviously, he's an icon in MMA and the UFC. Was Clay someone that you watched growing up and when you were watching MMA and getting into MMA and with aspirations of being in the UFC one day?
Yeah, before I even started fighting, I remember watching some Clay Guida fights. But I used to watch it not like, oh man, he's awesome. I always watch it from a wrestler's aspect of, man, if I started fighting, man, I'd take him down right there. I'd take him down right there. I could be that guy.
That's awesome. And I wanted to ask you also, it's a guy that you would have looked at before, the Ultimate Fighter, and maybe it's just time flying, but it feels like just yesterday that, we were watching you on the Ultimate Fighter. What's been the biggest change, in your life after leaving the show?
Being able to fully focus on just fighting. Prior to that, before the show, I was working one or two jobs and training. But since the show, I've been able just to focus strictly on training and diet and all the aspects of MMA.
And Dennis, I remember on the show you mentioned that you and your girlfriend broke up and wait till she sees you on the Ultimate Fighter. Now you're in a 6-fight win streak in one of the top featherweights in MMA and the UFC division. Have you heard from her since?
No, I haven't. And I mean, there's no way she'd be able to get in touch with me, and I wouldn't care either. So
that's probably a good thing. I was gonna say also, you've had a lot of entertaining fights, and you're on this 6-fight win streak. Your last 6 fights have been on the prelims. How do you feel that now you're finally back on the main card, and do you feel any pressure?
Yeah, a little bit maybe. But I try not to look at it like that. I'm just going in there and fighting. I don't care if I'm on Facebook or the prelims or the main event. I'm just going to go there and with the same game plan and get a win,
Absolutely. Now, Dennis, there's been a bit of a shake-up. Chad Mendes was supposed to fight Jose Aldo for the title. The fight's been delayed. Now that if you beat Clay, and not looking past Clay, obviously, because he's a tough challenge, but
right.
If you did beat him, this would be your 7th win in a row. Do you think that puts you right in line for a title shot next after Chad?
Yeah, for sure.
And I was going to ask also, even though you're on this big win streak, it seems that a lot of the attention in your division is drawn towards Conor McGregor due to him being so outspoken. Seems a lot of fighters want to derail his hype train. What are your thoughts on Conor, and do you think the hype is justified?
I really don't care what he's doing. He can run his mouth all he wants. And I actually my hat slightly goes off to him to be able to create the buzz he's created around himself. I'm almost slightly jealous, like I'm on a 6-fight win streak and no one's talking about me. This guy has 2 fights in the UFC and hundreds of thousands of followers, just because he talks a crazy game. But that's not why I got into fighting, I didn't get into fighting to have a WWE performance. I got into fighting to beat people up and really show my dominance.
Absolutely, Dennis. And, you're on Submission Radio and Conor McGregor's not, so that says something. And I was going to say, Frankie,
That's right.
Frankie, that's right. What are your thoughts on Frankie Edgar? He had a dominant performance over BJ Penn. That's another potential great fight that you could possibly set up after this Clay Guida fight. Is he someone that you look at as a potential competitor?
Yeah, for sure. Frank Edgar's a really tough guy. established in the wrestling community. He's a good striker. Yeah, so in the future, man, if I can get a win over him, if that were to go down for whether it was number one contender or for the when I get the belt or whatever it may be, that'd definitely be cool because him holding at the lightweight belt for a little bit and being a lot of really good guys would be a real sweet notch under my belt.
And obviously, Dennis, you're the type of guy where you don't talk a lot of trash. You do talking in the actual octagon. I spoke a bit about Conor McGregor before being, outspoken. But assuming you beat Clay, that'll make your 7th win in a row. Do you think that you'll get on the microphone and put in a bit of a performance and call out the champion, call out Jose or Chad Mendes?
Yeah. We'll just see how the fight goes first. In my head, which I plan to do, totally crush Clay Guida, whether I submit him or knock him out, I would like to scream for a title shot. I think I deserve it. 7 wins in a row, knocking off a top 10 opponent by stoppage, I think puts me out there definitely for a title shot. But if I just squeak by him, I'll let the UFC do their job and match me up with whoever they want me.
And Dennis, I was going to say, Chad mentioned that he's going to wait for a title shot no matter how long it takes Aldo to come back. Do you think that it makes sense for Chad to be waiting if it takes Aldo upwards, to, let's say, a year for him to come back? Or do you think maybe the UFC should consider doing an interim title fight in that case?
Well, it's tough because, he's definitely earned the right for a title shot. And in fighting, anything could happen, He maybe just has, a bad night when he would have had a good night and could have been a champion. If he has a bad night against someone when he's not fighting for a title, then he's out of title contention. And, in terms of money, he's got enough money just to – he could probably hang out for 2-3 years and be all right, So I don't think it's about the money. I think it's about getting that title for him.
I would agree. And not to get it too ahead of ourselves, but just, hypothetically, how do you see yourself stacking up against, like a Chad Mendes or a Jose Aldo, and who would you rather face?
Who would I rather face? I think it was the Aldo, just because he's got that factor that he could get tired. He comes out super strong in the first and second, but you get him in the third, fourth, fifth round, and he's he goes from being the best fighter in the featherweight division to, I don't know, maybe the middle fighter of the division when he's super tired.
Yeah, that's a great point, Dennis. And, it's essentially a fantasy prediction at this point. But when you see Aldo and Mendes, and let's say they do fight, who do you see coming out on top? What would your prediction be?
I think Chad is going to win. I think, sometimes being in the super spotlight, some guys crumble when they're there for the first time, and it's just a lot to take in. And then once you've been there and experienced it and stuff like that, I think it's you're used to it. That's one aspect. And since Jose Aldo and Chad Mendes have fought before, Chad's also developed knockout power. He's been knocking a lot of guys out, so I think that's another thing to add to his vocabulary of moves in there,
Yeah, I agree with you. I absolutely agree with you, Dennis. I was wondering, Chad mentioned that he would not want to fight Aldo in Brazil again. Obviously, some things happened when he fought him there last time. If you do get a title shot, would you be comfortable with fighting Aldo in Brazil, or would you want to have the fight somewhere else?
I don't care where I fight. Because once you get into the octagon, for me at least, everything else blurs out. I hear my corners, I can't see the crowd, and it's just me and my opponent and the bright lights.
Now, Dennis, we've got a few fan questions. We'll let everybody know you're coming on the show, and the fans gave some questions. Okay. VIP 1349 wanted to ask you. Well, actually, first he says the dude's a beast and probably top 5 favorite fighters for him, and that's obviously you. He wants to know how you think a rematch with Diego Brandao would go.
I think a rematch with Diego Brandao, if he got out of the first round, would result in me giving him a heart attack. and he wouldn't see the end of the fight.
Wow. And we got another fan question here from Conebone69. He likes to know, what do you attribute as the factor behind your 6-fight win streak? What do you think you've changed up? What do you think it attributes that to that?
I think I've just, I've always stayed pretty humble. I keep a kind of a small group around me that are super honest and tell me exactly what's on their mind, and if I'm acting, crazy, or if I need to train more, or, everybody around me is really honest, and they don't let fighting go to my head at all. And I still want to get better, and I'm always trying to get better every fight. So even though I win, I go back to the locker room. I'm like, all right, but I could have did this better. But we could do this better. Or this didn't work as planned. We're going to do this next time. So I'm constantly trying to get better, and just close the gap between me and my opponent, and the title.
And yeah, in MMA, that definitely seems like the attitude that you need to have, to basically get anywhere. Now, what we're going to do is have a bit of fun with you, Dennis. It's called the Submission Radio Tap-Out Round. Pat Cummings may or may not have told you about this one. It's a bit of fun. We throw a bunch of questions at you, kind of like word association. It's the getting to know you round. Okay. And you basically tell us the first thing that comes to your mind. Are you ready?
Yes.
All right, so we read in an article in Fighters Only that you prefer Sega to Nintendo. Please tell us that's a lie.
It is true.
Ah, Dennis. Dennis. Now,
it's hard. Hang on. The thing is, Super Nintendo or regular Nintendo?
We're just talking about Nintendo in general at this point.
Nintendo came out before Sega, but Super Nintendo and Sega are the same generation.
So when you say Sega over Nintendo, you mean back in the day, not as opposed to Nintendo in general, just in that generation, correct?
Oh yeah. I felt like that was the question.
All right.
Dennis, man, so many fans disappointed. I'm happy that we could clear that up, on the show. I think that's one of the more important things. Now, I read that you used to spend days creating characters in your video games growing up. So I want to know, what's your thoughts on EA UFC? And have you created any weird and crazy characters since the game's come out?
I'm not in the new game, right?
Unfortunately not, no.
Dude, what the hell is going on there?
I don't know what's going on. We were over at EA Sports in Sydney, and we were asking people what's going on. Why isn't Dennis Bermudez in the game? And I don't know. Hopefully, there's a DLC or something coming out.
And then they have other guys from the Ultimate Fighter on there.
That's right. They do. They got a few guys
from my season.
Wait, who else is in the game? Who else from your season of the Ultimate Fighter?
Hang on, I didn't hear what you just said.
No, I was just saying, who else from your season? Because I know a lot of guys from your season weren't there. I mean, TJ Dillashaw's not in there. Tyrone Woodley, Matt Browne, heaps of guys aren't in there. So I don't know. I would hope.
John Dotson's in there.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Lewis Gagnot's on it.
I think the only reason why they're there is because the flyweight division, there's not that many guys at the moment.
So... It's so small. Okay.
Yeah,
that's what I was thinking too. But still.
Fingers crossed that we see you in there as DLC. Now, next question, you versus Clay Guida. Of course, they're talking about hair versus hair. Whose is better?
I mean, it depends what you're into. If you're into time and stuff like that, I mean, he obviously put more time into his hair and growing it. But I think in terms of being professional and looking sharp, I have that all day. I've got a slick comb over, nice edge up, clean cut,
Some fighting words there from Dennis. Now, Dennis, I read that if you were on a desert island, you said the two games that you choose are Call of Duty and Gran Turismo. Now, without getting angry like with the Sega question, I just wanted to confirm if these were really the two games that you bring with you.
I would also put in there Grand Theft Auto.
Ah, okay.
Now we're talking. Which one, 4 or 5? Or are we talking like 3?
5.
5? Yeah,
okay.
that was awesome. Now, let's talk about the deserted island. If you could only bring 3 things in general, not games, just anything, what would they be?
If I could only bring 3 games?
Nah, just 3 things in general to a deserted island.
Something to create fire. So, let's go with torch. then I would need a weapon and something I could use. So I'd go with like an axe and a water purifier. Definitely. You
know,
water survive.
That's a very sound. You're like MacGyver, man. I don't know if anyone's ever told you that before, but that's a really good choice. Now, Dennis, we want to know ultimate matchup: you versus Joe Lozon in the Gamer versus Gamer. Who wins? Do you think?
In what game?
That's it.
Let's say Call of Duty, because we know he plays that as well.
Call of Duty?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm not gonna sit here and bullshit you guys. I'm like a 500 Call of Duty gamer.
Wow.
If I get one, if my kill death ratio is 1, it usually hangs out around 1. I know, like my little brother, he's better than me. His kill death ratio is like 1.35 or something like that. I want to punch him in his head. He's better than me.
I feel like Bruce Buffer should announce these things before the fight. Like, you know, he's an amazing fighter coming from this camp. And he also has a rating of this in Call of Duty. I think it would impress a lot of people.
Now, Dennis, the Submission Radio marketing team have come up with some flashy new moves to add to your arsenal, and you have to pick the one you like the most. Are you ready?
Okay.
All right, we've got the Menace to Society lock. We've got the Hey, Mr. Wilson. Or we've got the Bermuda's Triangle, where people disappear. Which one do you prefer?
Wow. Bermuda's Triangle.
Of course.
Oh, man. That's awesome marketing department. Now, Dennis, which music artist do you find most annoying? That's just a random one out there.
Music artist?
Mm-hmm.
Kanye West.
Yeah, no. Yeah, he used to be amazing. Now, not so much. Now,
I once touched his hand in Melbourne, 2005. I don't know why I just said that.
Now, here's a question from the tap out round that is from one of the fans. It's from Good Old Wrestling. Here's a noodle scratcher. Would you rather fight 10 hamsters the size of Shane Carwin or 100 hamster-sized Shane Carwins? Now, please keep in mind that Carwin is an engineer, and who knows what 100 engineers could put together regardless of the size.
Wow. 10 hamsters the size of
Shane Carwin.
Shane Carwin or 100
Shane Carwins.
Or 100. Oh, yeah, I'm going to go 100 Shane Carwins the size of hamsters.
Wow, there's 100 of them, though.
Yeah, I'm just going to kick at them.
Yeah, TJ
like,
Dillashaw.
I'll just do like a sweeping kick. Just knock them all over.
Now, Dennis, how weird is it to shoot those road to the Octagon shows? Now, I know that it must be one of your first ones. It seems like there's a lot of standing around and looking off into the distance when they shoot those shows. Did you find it weird?
For those guys or for me?
For you.
For me?
Yeah, did you find it weird, you know, the whole shooting process of them getting the shots of you looking off into the distance and running and training and looking all mysterious?
Oh, right. Well, it wasn't my first rodeo because I did the Ultimate Fighter show.
Of course,
so, yeah. I know the drill. I know the routine.
Awesome. And finally,
it wasn't that bad.
Finally, Dennis, how are you planning on winning against Clay Guida at UFC on Fox next weekend?
I'm going to put a blanket over him and suffocate him.
Awesome. Aladdin 3. Now, Dennis, before we let you go, we've done a thing on Submission Radio where we're turning over our timeline to our guests and listeners. What date and time can we add to our timeline from your fantastic career or life?
I'm going to say May 5th, when I fought Pablo Garza, and I got my first UFC win, my first official UFC win. I was like, all right, I belong here. I could do this. There's going to be a lot more to come.
Awesome. Well, it's in there. It's officially down there, and it was a fantastic moment. Guys, don't forget to follow Dennis Bermudez at Menace Bermudez. That's obviously on Twitter. And, of course, he's got a big fight next weekend against Clay Guida, July 26th, July 27th for all the Aussies at UFC on Fox 12. It's going to be awesome. Dennis, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks for having me, man. It was fun.
Dennis Bermudez there. What a great guy. And, you know, it's just a pleasure to have a couple of Dennises on the show for a change. And, you know, just such a comedic guy, and it's such a pleasure to talk to. And, you know, really interested to see this fight against Clay Guida because, you know, this is going to be a big one for Dennis. And, you know, it'll be a great matchup.
Yeah, and, you know, obviously him and Pat Cummings are good friends. Pat Cummings was previously on Submission Radio, I think, about 2 episodes ago, and it's going to be interesting because they're going to be fighting on the same card. That is, of course, UFC on Fox, Lawler vs. Browne. It's coming up next weekend, and just to get everybody excited, some of the other fights are Anthony Rumble Johnson against Little Nog, Clay Guida versus Dennis Bermudez, Josh Thompson versus Bobby Green, Carl Kingsbury versus Patrick Cummings, Jorge Masvidal versus Darren Cruikshank, and a lot more.
Yeah, I'm a bit just on that Josh Thompson fight. I was a little bit surprised to see him versus Michael Johnson. Obviously, Michael Johnson, a great fighter, but I expected him to grab a bigger name for his return fight. Now that he's fighting Bobby Green, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens in that fight. Obviously, Josh Thompson, coming back from a long layoff, so it's a great tune-up fight for him if he is looking to fight someone in the top again. But then again, Bobby Green, he's no slouch. He might give him a bit of a challenge and a bit of a run for his money.
Yeah, I think Josh Thompson's looked really, really good recently. I think that Benson-Henderson fight was really close, could have gone either way. I would arguably give it to Josh. And obviously Josh, he considered retiring afterwards. And Michael Johnson, he's another guy who's really been on a run, who really needed to step up in competition. So I think the fight made sense. But, Bobby Green, the dude is on a run. He hasn't lost since 2011. He's won, I think, about seven or eight fights in a row, and he recently beat Pat Healy. That was in 2013. So, yeah, you never know. Upsets, they happen all the time. Josh Thompson, I think, is the heavy favorite. But I love these fights. I love these fights when a guy steps up on a short notice and don't really know what's going to happen.
Yeah, Bobby Green licking his chops. Excited for this one, I think. And, we'll cover it a little bit closer as it gets to the fight. But, hopefully Josh Thompson doesn't let this long layoff and what happened with the decision with the Benson-Henderson fight affect his head or his mentality going into this one, because we love Josh Thompson on the show. And what people don't realize is a long time ago, when you and me were doing a different type of show, we almost had Josh on. This was in 2007, I believe. So it'll be great to get Josh on after the fight and have a chat to him about it. But Cass, before we get to our next guest, who is Tim Kennedy, Diego Sanchez, he's coming to town on the 15th and 17th of August through Everything MMA. They're a great company here in Australia, very trustworthy. EverythingMMA.com.au. You'll get an opportunity to do a seminar with the man, get to meet him, find out his trade secrets, get in his mind, which I think would be a bit scary, but there's an opportunity to do that, and you can even have dinner with him. So I'm pretty excited for that. I know me and Cass are going to be doing a face-to-face interview with him when he comes to town, and we'll be able to let you guys into the mind of Diego Sanchez.
And if you've ever wanted to learn some moves from Diego and then go have dessert for him, this is your chance. And I believe he's going to be coming to Melbourne and Perth.
Yeah, that's right. Perth and Melbourne and Perth. You can book your tickets through everythingmma.com.au, or you can call 0892491800. That's, of course, if you're in Australia. So jump on that, Aussies, because, it's always a fun time whenever they come down under. But Cass, we're opening up our gates. We're a trustworthy man with a house, and we'll open the gates up so people could play in our yard, go in the house, go in the kitchen, make themselves a sandwich. I'm, of course, talking about our Facebook timeline.
Don't forget, make some Pop-Tarts. They are in the cupboard as well. But as far as our Facebook timeline, we want you to be part of our timeline forever. So as well as our guests and the fighters and the coaches that we have on our show, we will be from now on asking them to nominate a specific date in their career that's important to them. And what they'll do is basically tell us a date, such as their pro debut, their big win, they won the Ultimate Fighter, they won a title, whatever the case is. We'll be adding that to basically to that timeline. We want to do the same thing with yourselves. So email us at submissionradioaustralia@gmail.com as a fan or an amateur fighter or a lesser known pro fighter. Let us know an important date in your life, something to do with MMA. Maybe the first fight you watched, maybe it was, when Fedor lost and you stayed up all night crying much like we did. Or maybe it was, big UFC party at your house with the guys and everybody got shit-faced and somebody got upset. Whatever it is, email us at submissionradioaustralia@gmail.com and you'll be part of our timeline forever.
Yeah, it feels like everybody always gets upset at those parties. And guys, just when you do send your email through, include the date, what happened on the date. If you have a sneaky photo, you can also include that too. We're happy to put that up. And it's just a way for you to become a part of our Facebook and for us to be a part of your lives. We love the fact that you tune into our show. And there's no better way to get our Facebook page going than to get your dates and times in there and just to become one, as I believe Diego Sanchez would say.
On to our next guest, guys. This guy needs very little introduction. Former Ranger. We're going to be chatting to him about his big upcoming fight. Dennis, why don't you tell the good people at home who we've got next on the show?
Our next guest is one of the top middleweights in the UFC, coming off a great win over Michael Bisping and fighting Yoel Romero at UFC 178. It's Tim Kennedy. Welcome to Submission Radio, Tim.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Hello. Now, Tim, let's address one of the biggest pieces of news to come out about you recently. Apparently, you have a fascination with teddy bears, with upwards of 100 on your bed. And after analyzing the photos, there was even a creepy clown-looking one. Are the rumors true?
Yeah. So you never trust your friend. That's my takeaway from this. Is don't trust them with any unedited footage of you doing anything. And if they ask you to say anything on camera that you don't know what it's pertaining to, don't trust them.
So, when you say that, is it true or is it not true?
No, dude, I don't own a single teddy bear. I think if I have ever owned one, it was probably filled with tannerite, and I shot it with a bullet as target practice or something like that. You know, like I can't imagine me ever having owned one, but I can imagine at some juncture in the future hurting my friend Nick, the guy that made the video.
Well, yeah. I mean, this is awkward now because all of our questions are based around teddy bears for the next half an hour, but I got to knock this one out. I think a lot of us were disappointed here in Australia when we looked at the photo and there was no awesome koala bear. So it's good to know that wasn't your collection, but was that Nick's collection perhaps?
No, I think he found that image on the internet, and like all things, he manipulated it to make me look like an idiot, which he's pristinely talented at. But if it does bode into me earning your guys' appreciation, I am Ranger qualified, and when you'd get in trouble in Ranger school, they would make you climb up onto a tree and then hang yourself upside down on the tree and hang onto the tree until finally your arms and legs would give out and you fall on top of your head. So I did that many times because I got in trouble a lot. So I am qualified.
Oh man, that was brilliant. Well, that's funny. We give out the same punishment at Submission Radio for people that don't write our questions correctly. They're like, all right, off you go to the tree upside down. But Tim, we got to ask you. Last time we saw you in the octagon, you beat Michael Bisping. What have you been up to since that fight?
Riding motorcycles, shooting, training. Jumping out of helicopters. I don't know. Normal Tim Kennedy life stuff.
Well, just speaking of the Tim Kennedy lifestyle, I don't think a lot of people really know much about you. Obviously, we know about your great background, as you mentioned, in the military. But just take us through a typical day in Tim Kennedy's life when he's not, preparing for a fight. What's a day like in your life?
Wake up mid morning, 6, 7 o'clock. Hop on motorcycle ride over to the gym. Get a little strength and conditioning workout in with some buddies. Then come back, do a little prep, grab my guns, head to the range, shoot for a little bit. Come back, eat, then go to a different workout. Then come back and see how much time I have left to do something else cool. I live in Austin, Texas, so I'm surrounded by a lot of cool, fun things to do. If you like doing idiotic things.
And we do love doing idiotic things. So, I mean, it's pretty cool. So, essentially, in the MMA world, you're like the James Bond of MMA. But I just wanted to ask you, Tim, in regards to your last fight, after fighting Michael Bisping, you seemed a little bit disappointed on yourself, perhaps hard on yourself, considering you beat one of the best middleweights in the world. What's something that you learned and made changes to since that fight?
Ironically, I was about to tweet something out. It was a video or a voice memo that Greg Jackson, Mike Winkeljohn, and Brandon Gibson did with me after my last fight. We did like a debrief after the last fight. Things that went well, things that didn't go well. things we did right, things we didn't do right. You know, it's like, we call it an AAR, an after action review. And I was just going over that today, and so there are a lot of things immediately, you know, we talked about things that I didn't do right, and things that we're going to change or have changed since then that we've prepared for. You know, I think one of the biggest things was kind of my mentality of what I'm wanting to do in a fight. You know, like I wanted to go in there and knock out Michael Bisping. That was like what I wanted to do. So, you know, I was going to wear him out. I was going to make him be scared of the ground, and then I was going to hit him with big shots. I was trying so hard to knock him out that I never did any of the stuff that we've been working on. So, you know, just like being able to implement the things that you've trained and execute them without being distracted by, you know, being so focused on the goal that you forget about the process, about how to get there.
I see, Tim. So yeah, that's very interesting. And then when you draw a guy like Yoel Romero at UFC 178, a guy that looks like he's straight out of Street Fighter with an interesting, unorthodox style in terms of striking, you know, and an Olympic level wrestling background. What were your thoughts about the matchup initially? Was Yoel someone that you wanted? Because, you know, a lot of people thought you might even get a bigger name that will vault you straight into that title shot.
I wanted Vitor Belfort. Well, I wanted to clean Vitor Belfort. Apparently that wasn't possible. So Yoel is really good. He's very talented. You know, I actually think he's better than Vitor Belfort. So he poses a lot of problems. You know, like you said, he's not a big name. You know, he only has 4 fights for the UFC. He's 4-0. He's a very, very, very talented athlete, and he's a very good fighter. So, you know, Joe Silva asked me to fight him, and, you know, I'm not in a position. I only have 3 fights in the UFC. I can't say no. So if he says, hey, this is the guy you want me to fight, you know, my response is, cool, let's do it.
Now, yeah, it is a very intriguing matchup. Obviously, someone like yourself, you're a lot more established than Yoel, but he's a very dangerous guy. You know, you're a high-level grappler and you have knockout power. Same can be said about Yoel. Obviously, Olympic wrestler, and 8 of his 9 fights have been finished via TKO or KO. What will be the game plan coming into this fight? Will we be looking to take advantage on the feet or on the ground in this one?
No. No, he's demonstrated that, you know, he'll use the takedown to change kind of the tempo where the fight is. He doesn't pose a lot of threat to me, you know, submission-wise, and but he definitely has that explosive power, you know, that he can do both ground and pound or on our feet. So what I have to do is be able to disrupt, you know, kind of what he wants. Disrupt his rhythm. You know, like I can't let him start setting the pace and the range, you know, for his athleticism. I really need to take away all the things that he wants to do. And, you know, he wants to land big power shots, you know, and hit takedowns for ground and pound.
Now, Tim, you know, looking at Yoel, I always wondered, preparing for him must be difficult because, you know, getting training partners to sort of mimic how he moves and what he does must be, you know, it must be a bit difficult. Did you guys find that preparing for this fight, just preparing for some of his efforts and styles? And did you guys have guys in the gym actually mimicking his style, especially his striking style?
Yes. We have a couple of guys that, you know, like, ironically, I don't even have to say, hey, you know, can you try to imitate this or can you try to mimic that? It naturally moved that way. So it was very fortunate that, yeah, we already got guys like that at Jackson.
And I'd have to ask, would you say that because obviously you're on a 4-fight win streak close to the title, Yoel also has a 4-fight win streak at the moment as well, would you say he's your most dangerous opponent, just given the fact that his skill, but also the low name value?
He's very dangerous in different ways. You know, like Roger Gracie is, you know, one of the best grapplers ever. And, you know, so he posed some serious threats. You know, Rafael Natal, he's
at the time. You know, he was on a win streak. He's very dangerous black belt. Another Henzo Gracie guy. You know, and then Michael Bisping, that guy's like perennial contender. He's beaten some of the biggest and best names in the sport. You know, gotten to the kind of title eliminator a couple of times. So, no, I don't know. Yes, in some regards, he definitely poses a bigger threat than some of the guys I fought previously. But, you know, like, I fought Melvin Manhoff. You know, if you're going to ask, like, talk about knockout power, like, nobody has it more than that guy.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, he is a certified beast. Now, you mentioned Vitor Belfort, and, you know, there's been some issues with PEDs in your division, especially with legends like Vanderlei Silva, Chael Sonnen, Vitor Belfort, as you mentioned, having to take a bit of a break. And now even Russian fighter Ali Bogatinov, who's obviously not in your division, just recently tested positive for something. And you've mentioned that this worries you, but as a fighter, what do you think needs to change, you know, for the better, so PEDs aren't as much of an issue? And why do you think everyone's just being caught now? Does that make you think that people have been on it for a while, or do you think there's an increase, an uptake in PEDs recently?
So guys have definitely been on it for a really long time and a whole bunch of different stuff. So they just started, you know, if you ask every single fighter, every single guy, or if you ask them if they've ever been blood tested, the vast majority of them will say no. The stuff that they're catching these guys on are things that you can only find with blood tests. So, you know, only recently in the past few months have we tested guys, you know, for HGH, EPO, you know, stuff that you can only find in the blood. And ironically, those guys that they test keep failing. So it's definitely been there, and there's not like there's an increase of it. It's just you're testing for it, you're going to find it, and a whole bunch of guys are using it, and a lot more than they found. You kind of had a two-part question, like, you know, what can we do about it? Well, test more guys. Like, you know, they tested like 6 or 7 dudes. Jon Jones, Teixeira, both of those guys came back clean. Demetrius and Ali both tested. Demetrius came back clean. Ali did not. Failed, obviously. Vanderlei ran from the Athletic Commission, you know, guy that came in and take the sample. Vitor Belfort failed. You know, like, these are recurring themes here that if you're gonna test guys, they're gonna fail. So you have to test more of them to really understand where the issue is and how many guys are doing it.
Absolutely, Tim. I was brought to an interesting perspective about Bogatinov, where you know, he was tested pre-fight, and those were the tests that came back negative. And now people are waiting to see how the tests post-fight turn out. And if those tests are clean, you know, then there's, you know, sneaky maneuvers that could be done where it leaves your system and you can still use it. But I was just going to say, you know, you mentioned Vitor Belfort before. Would you fight Vitor Belfort knowing he was on something like back when everyone was on TRT? Would you still be comfortable fighting Vitor? Because you look like a kind of guy that will just fight anyone, anywhere, anytime.
Yeah, I love fighting, and I definitely subscribe to the I'll fight anybody, anywhere, anytime thing. So would I have fought, you know, they asked me to fight him, and I said yes. They asked me to fight him in Brazil. I said yes. They asked me to fight Vitor Belfort at 205 in Brazil. I said yes. And then I asked if we could do any anti-doping stuff, and they said no. So not only would I be fighting Vitor Belfort in Brazil while he's on steroids, at a weight class that I shouldn't be fighting at. So yes, obviously, you know, you can look. It was publicized. He was the one that said no, or his manager said no, whatever. So yeah, I would have fought him. Yes, I did. I even said I would fight him. But the levels of like how wrong and idiotic that is, that like I'm the one that has to go to Brazil to fight him. No, he won't take any steroid tests, you know, for VADA, and I have to fight it at 205. It's like crazy talk. But I said yeah.
So I just want to clarify, Tim. So when you said they said no, was it like the UFC that said no, or you mean like Vitor Belfort and his management said no to the steroid testing?
Yeah, his camp.
Okay. Now, I wanted to ask you, obviously, Vitor, you know, he's going to be coming back, assumingly, at some point. He's in your division. He'll be returning. Possibly you guys will be facing at some point in the future. Do you think he'll have the same kind of success when he returns?
So, right now, you know, he's down in Brazil or back in California, training his butt off, like injecting everything that he wants to and loving it. Nobody's testing him, or like, you know, his doctor. When I say his, I'm using quotation fingers, doctor. So, you know, he's like dripping testosterone out of his eyeballs right now. How old was he when he first failed a drug test? Like 19?
Yeah,
for,
something like that.
For an anabolic steroid. I mean, so he's been using for 20 years. Your body doesn't function naturally now. He's, 37 or 38? So like 18 years. There's no possible way that he can compete at a high level, so against the Chris Weidmans, the Mees, the Luke Rockholds, without chemically enhancing himself. There's no way. I don't care if he's like drinking Jesus' blood like he says he is or whatever. It doesn't work that way. Like, he's been using steroids since he was, you know, for like 15, 20 years, and he still is using them. And if he ever tries to get clean, he can't compete at this level.
Interesting, Tim, and you know, he may definitely be like the Charlie Sheen of MMA with the tiger blood running through his veins. Now, you mentioned Chris Weidman, and he recently had a fight with Lyoto Machida. Just wanted to get your thoughts on the fight. Did you watch it? What did you think of Weidman's performance?
I love that fight. I thought it was masterful on both their parts. It was very competitive. Lyoto Machida, he's a man. I love the guy. It was a great fight. I think more than anything, it said that Chris Weidman deserves to be the middleweight champion. You know, You know, he won the fight every way. Came back from adversity. You know, hit the takedowns when he should. Conserved energy when he should. Hit power shots when he should. Like, he did everything as he should have. Like, as a champion, you know, it was a brilliant performance and a great fight.
And I wanted to ask you, just in terms of you stacking up against Chris Weidman, you know, if you assuming you beat Yoel Romero, you could be versing him sooner than later. I remember hearing there was something about the two of you grappling. I think a video surfacing of you versing Chris Weidman. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I went up there, New York, and trained with Ray Longo for a little bit. Did some pads, and while I was there, you know, this new young kid that only had a couple of fights in the UFC, you know, came in and we trained. I guess somebody did shoot it. I haven't been able to find that video, but it was very competitive. You know, like me not knowing who he was, and you know, I've been in MMA for forever. I'm rolling with this kid. I'm like, holy crap, this guy's good. You know, everywhere. It was like transitions, scrambles, great defense, great offense. And there wasn't a single, you know, this is a couple of years ago. There wasn't a single part of his repertoire that I wasn't impressed with. And afterwards, I told Ray, I was like, dude, that guy is seriously good. You know, he's like, I know. Just wait, just watch. So, like, I had profound respect for him just as, like, who he was as an athlete, how he behaved in the gym. And, you know, I was excited about his career. So, you asked to out of the matchup. It was very competitive. It was, you know, we didn't spar. We moved around a little bit in the cage, but, you know, most of what we did for a couple hours was wrestling and grappling, and it was very, very back and forth. So, you know, it was humbling on my part to like be working with what I thought was like a no-name kid who was just as good as I was at everything, and you know, and now he's like the middleweight champion. So it's pretty cool, and it was exciting to retrospectively look back and be like, wow, he's been good for a long time.
And now, well, yeah, exactly. He's amazing, and we're excited to see, some of his future fights, and hopefully, we'll be able to see the matchup between you two because you guys would be a great matchup. Now, speaking of, great talents, you guys have Alistair Overeem in the gym there. He's going to be on this episode as well, but before he comes on later on, I just want to get the lowdown, because you've been working with Overeem. What's it like having him in the camp? Have you been able to work well together? What's it like having him as the new addition to Jackson Winkeljohn?
So I get to Jackson's in a couple of weeks. I've only heard from teammates of what he's been like while he's been there, and I don't know, it's an attitude change from how he used to be at different camps. But everybody is saying, man, he's a team player. He's a hard worker. He doesn't talk back to the coaches. He's a pleasure to be around. So I won't see him for another couple of weeks. So everything that I'm saying is hearsay. This is all, this is now a couple of people removed. But every from my teammates and coaches, all of them have been saying that it's been a real privilege to have him around.
Awesome. That's absolutely fantastic. Now, Tim, also we wanted to ask you a few questions. Basically, we let the fans know that you were coming on the show. We opened the floodgates, and the fans had a few questions for you. So just right off the bat, I think his name's R Wrestler. His question is, do you see yourself beating Chris Weidman if you got the title shot?
I know it'd be a very competitive fight. I wouldn't be in the sport if I didn't think I could compete at the highest level and be the champion. That's what I want to be. And I really believe that I am at his level. He deserves to be the champion, and I think I could go in there. I don't want to say I could catch him, but I think I could beat him. And if I didn't believe that, and I wouldn't say it, then why? Then I got out of the sport. I go do something else. So yeah, I do believe that, and I can't wait to have the chance.
And I think that really is the champion's mentality. I've got one more question, and that's from Shui30. Here's an interesting question. He asked, is what you do in the octagon easy and the real hard stuff is in the battlefield?
But they're so different in every way. I can't even compare them. No, there's aspects of fighting that are just as hard as military stuff. Like how hard it is on the body, how physically taxing it is during fight camp. Like that's just as hard as some things that we did in special forces training. But comparing like the battlefield to the cage, there's no similarities between them at all. One is a sport, and it's fun, and and we're in there with a fellow participant that volunteered to go in there and get paid to get punched in the head. Then we have a referee. We got a padded floor. We're inside this little octagon that's there to protect us. And then there's the battlefield, which is horrific and awful and terrible. There's not a single element of it that is similar to a fight.
And we appreciate you answering that question. Obviously, the fans have some interesting questions. I have one last question from the fans. This one's coming from Joe Stevenson, and I think it's an interesting one. He's asking, do you think that a fighter having large muscles is a detriment to them in terms of having issues with lactic acid buildup? Or is there a way that you go about, obviously, you're a sexy beast, you're very muscular. Is there a way that you go about training, obviously keeping your large muscular form, but at the same time making sure that it doesn't affect your performance?
The human body is an amazingly adaptive thing. And it will do what you train it to do. I don't lift weights to put on muscle ever. All the muscle I have is just a byproduct of like the fast twitch anabolic movements. I do more plyometrics than I do anything. I do more metabolic conditioning than I do anything. This is all fast tempo cardio type stuff. I'm just naturally a big dude, and I do think that there's a trade-off. The more muscle you have and how you train your muscle is how it's going to perform. Could I go out and run a marathon right now? No. I definitely have a different type of body. I have one that's designed to sprint for 25 minutes and at a high speed and be able to do violence for 25 minutes. So there's no single way to answer that question. Yes and no. Yes, muscle can slow you down. Lactic acid can ruin your cardio. But if you want to hit hard and you want to move fast, you have to have it. So you have to find a balance between those two things.
Now, Tim, I wanted to what we're going to do next basically is a segment that we call the Submission Radio Tap Out Round. It's kind of similar to a word association where we fire off a whole bunch of questions and you want to answer them pretty much as quick as you can, or at least with the first thing that comes to your mind. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, what's the most delicious meal you've ever cooked using the gun knife and the double-barrel Spanish shotgun spoon?
I made a bison venison stew.
Now, Tim, obviously I told you a lot of the questions are based around teddy bears. The tap-out round is no different. Listen to this teddy bear joke. What did the teddy bear say when he was offered a second helping? Do you know what he said, Tim?
I do not.
He said, "No thanks, I'm already stuffed." And Tim, before you break out into laughter, I have another one for you. Tim.
Okay, give me one more.
Yeah, before you break out into laughter, I know you're holding the laughter to the last one, and that's okay because we've used this one before. I don't like to reuse material, but here we go. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, a polar bear goes into a bar and says, "May I have a gin and tonic, please?" The barman begins to serve him, but asks, "Why the large pause?" The polar bear says, "I don't know. I've always had them."
That was a good one. I'm not sure which I like both. Which one I like more. They're both pretty brilliant.
I won't make you choose one, but yeah, obviously Tim Kennedy's never coming back on the
show. Next question, Tim. How many times did you watch Ted? Be honest.
I have seen it once.
Wow, I think I even watched it a few times. If you had to break it down into a percentage, how much of a role does the mental game factor into fighting, in your opinion?
Half.
Okay. Now, Tim, you got snubbed from EA Sports UFC, obviously the game. Were you disappointed, and will we ever see you in the game in the future, possibly as downloadable content?
No, I did not feel snubbed. Yes, I could definitely see them putting me as like a DLC or addition to the game, or a later version of the game. So, yes.
Now, Tim, a question that a lot of people have been wondering, if timing works out, would you be interested in fighting the legendary Anderson Silva before he retires?
I would love nothing more.
Now, Tim...
Sorry, you go. I fight in the end of September, so that makes, he was talking about coming back at the end of the year. I would be more than ready to fight, at the end of the year card as well.
Wow, could you imagine that? That gives me goosebumps. All
right. Tim, what's the craziest thing that's ever happened at Jackson's Winkeljohns during training?
Man. To me, or just in general?
Just in general.
So when Rustam came to the gym, he was fresh off the plane from Russia, and it's like I went and I gave him like a fairly awkwardly long hug, and he pulled away, I was like, but this is how we say hi in America.
Yeah.
And I came back in to give him another really long, weird, awkward hug, and he threw me, and I didn't threw me, like my feet were pointing towards the ceiling, my head was pointing towards the floor. And I traveled through the air like Superman and landed on my head. And he's like, "That's how we say hi in Dagestan." And I was like, awesome. So I immediately fell in love with that
guy. Nice.
Tim, I'm from Ukraine, and we say hi by knitting each other nice scarves. So definitely wrong geography, no matter what you hear on the news. Now, Tim, what's the best movie of all time? And you can't think about it. You got to give us an answer right now.
Best movie of all times is The Big Country.
Now, speaking of movies, you not so long ago did a reenactment video of the dancing scene from Black Swan. Now, we've seen Black Swan, and there's two scenes that stick out. The dancing scene, and then the hot bedroom scene with Mila Kunis. Looking back, do you think that maybe you chose the wrong one to reenact?
Yes and no, because I was the Black Swan, and that Natalie Portman was the Black Swan in her movie with Mila Kunis. That means if we're going to stay in theme, I would have to make out with another guy, and I would not like that. And if I'm against it, I just don't want to make out with another guy personally. So I think with that in mind, I chose the right scene.
But and to quote Seinfeld, not that there's anything wrong with that, but I was going to say in the movie it was Mila Kunis and Natalie Portman. So just saying, if you did reenact it, had you been Natalie Portman, you would have been making out with Mila Kunis. So food for thought.
Oh man, that would have been a pristine opportunity. And my wife would also hit me in the back of the head with a baseball.
I like it. But yeah, now Tim, let us know. Are you a member of any forums such as Sherdog, the Underground, and do you post under a sneaky alias like Rodrigo97?
That is not my handle, but yes, I do post on them, and I do have a sneaky one.
Is it weird? Is it weird sometimes? I suppose there's a lot of posts about you, and then you might be like, I hear he's blah, 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 and then someone would be like, shut up, you don't know anything about Tim Kennedy. Who are you, noob? Ever get any of those situations happening to you?
Yeah, it's, I don't know why, but like some of the forums like me and some of them don't. It's like a common theme among all the fans of each respective different forum, whether it's like the Underground or Sherdog or Middle Easy. Like some of them like me a little bit more, and some of them like loathe me and like want to boil me in oil. So sometimes like it hurts my sensitive feelings when I read some of the horrible things people say about me.
I can only imagine. Tim, another question. Finish this sentence. People don't know that I
am the best ballerina on the planet.
Well, they saw the video. What about if they saw the Black Swan video?
That's a snapshot in what I can do. When I dance and I really start to express myself, it's a beautiful, beautiful tragedy.
And Tim, final question. We're going to let you off the hook after this one. When is Tim Kennedy coming to Australia, kick some ass, cook up some stuff with weapons, and almost teach a MacGyver/MMA seminar?
It couldn't be soon enough. Kyle Noak and I joke about it all the time. He's one of my best mates, and I love spending time with that guy. Greg Jackson loves Australia. So man, you give me an opportunity, I'll be on a plane over there. Seriously, love that place. I think Texas and Australia have kindred spirits. Like the people are like a gritty, tough, hard, kind of like robust, love their independence. And so I don't know. There's a lot in common, and I cannot wait to go.
I have a really good knitting club here in Melbourne, so if you come down, you'll have to join us for a session.
Oh, I'm in. You give me a knitting needle, and I can do some scary things.
That's right. You could. Now, Tim, before we let you go, we're doing a new thing on Submission Radio where we're turning over our timeline on our Facebook page to the fans and the listeners, and obviously our amazing guests such as yourself. And Tim, we want to enter a time in the timeline under your name. So we want to find out, what's a particular point in your career or your life that you'd like us to include on our Facebook timeline? And you got to give us the date and what happened then.
Go January 4th, 2004.
Great. And what happened on that date?
I joined the Army.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, so we'll be adding that, and you're going to be one of the first entries. And yeah, amazing, Tim. And yeah, thank you so much for coming onto the show. We really enjoyed. Obviously, your fight's coming up at UFC 178, and we can't be more excited for it. It's going to be an amazing fight.
And don't forget to follow Tim, obviously, on Twitter at Tim Kennedy MMA, or go to rangerup.com/Tim Kennedy. Tim, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Tim Kennedy, one of the most interesting personalities in MMA. We spoke about Batman. I think that Tim Kennedy would make a good Batman, a good Batman. I think he'd be a good Batman. There's a few other superheroes in my mind that I just can't think of at the moment, but I think Tim Kennedy is definitely superhero worthy and such a great interview.
Well, it makes sense. I mean, he could basically kill people with his bare hands. He's got the whole Ranger background, the Army background, and he knows how to use weapons. And you know, Batman has all kind of crazy gadgets. And he's of course he's got the physique for a superhero.
He doesn't have the Batman personality though. He's got a good. He likes to have a bit of a laugh. Maybe he's more. Yeah, it's a tough one. It's a tough one, man. It's a tough one, isn't it?
I don't know. These things are more we need to answer in the future, and here's your chance, guys. We're opening up the gates to basically talk about a little bit more things. Often with the show, we have interviews, we have our guests on, we talk to them, but we don't talk too much about what we actually think about, you know, MMA and things like that. So we want to get your questions, the fan questions. Ask whatever you want to know, and we'll talk about those specific subjects. Feel free to send any questions you have in. It can be about MMA in theory, it could be about life, whatever. Send them into submissionradioaustralia@gmail.com, and starting from next week, we will be answering fan questions.
Absolutely, guys. Put submission radio question in the title so our media manager could separate them, and send us your best questions that you think that you'd like us to talk about for the episode. I'm sure we're gonna get fun with it. There'll be a lot of fun little things that we'll do with it, and obviously you'll be credited for your question live on the show. And who knows, maybe you can even be on the show at some point as well. So yeah, send in those questions. We love to hear what the listeners think, and we love to talk about what the listeners want us to talk about. So give the people what they want is what my mom told me once when I made a science project in year 10 and I failed. So this time around, I think we'll do it properly. And yeah, send it into submissionradioaustralia@gmail.com.
But coming up next, guys, we've got another big guest. The man needs very little introduction. We can't wait to chat to him.
That's right. And before we jump to this guest, guys, oh man, our YouTube channel, Submission Radio AU. I mean, I don't want to be biased, but we've got some good stuff up there. And this is the first time that you're tuning into the show through Stitcher, iTunes, TuneIn, or even just listening through an associated video somewhere else on the net. Check out the channel. So that's Submission Radio AU. At the moment, we've got Tito Ortiz talking about his big exhibition fight with Dana White. We've got an interview with Bas Rutten, who talks about Vanderlei Silva Pride. Oh, man, he gives us some stories. This one story in particular, we don't want to spoil it for you, but he talked about a certain fight that he had when he was the bouncer that could have changed his whole life. So tune into that one. We've got Paul Daly, where he talks about wanting to return to the UFC and what's going on between him and Dana White. And if you want to go old school, we've got Don Fry, who breaks it down for us. Don is obviously a friend of the show, and he'll be back on soon. Chad Mendes talks about Conor McGregor, tells us what he thinks about the man. Obviously, Conor is so topical right now. Our buddy Hector Lombard, who's a fellow Aussie-Cuban, jumps on the show for a good 20 minutes to talk about what's going on with him. And if you missed Bjorn Rebney, he was on the show too, talking about his thoughts on Bellator. Big John McCarthy, you know, he's one of the best referees in MMA. We've got a big, in-depth conversation with him. So you can go back in time to even a Bob Sepp or a Ken Shamrock, other Jon Overeem interview. Just so much stuff, isn't that right, Cass?
It's absolutely right. I feel like we're about to say, but wait, there's more. And there is, but we'll let you figure that out yourself, guys. Submission Radio AU. Don't forget, if you don't have the time to check this out on YouTube, jump on Stitcher, iTunes, or TuneIn Radio, or of course the BlackBerry podcast market, a delicious market, and all our episodes are available there as well.
That's right. And there's just so much stuff to mention. Our Twitter page, at Submission AUS, you know, this thing will get us in trouble one day. You know, we put up a lot of fun updates. You know, there's a lot of humor on it. Check it out. Follow us. Obviously, all guest updates are up there as well. And you can interact with us whenever you want, 24 hours a day. Let us know what you think about the fights, what's going on. I know when the fights are on, usually we're live tweeting it. We're live tweeting our opinions and communicating with all the other MMA fans out there. So follow us. It's a lot of fun, and you know, we love to hear what you're thinking about the fights as they happen. But following up now, I think, Cass, it's time for the big one, the Reem, the Destructor himself. He will be facing Ben Rothwell, you know, and we love having him on the show. I think he's on the line. So, Cass, do the introduction.
All right, guys, our next guest needs very little introduction. He is a former Strikeforce heavyweight champion, former Dream heavyweight champion. He was a former K1 champion, and he's obviously now in the UFC, one of the most dominant heavyweights of all time. He is none other than Alistair Overeem. Alistair, welcome back to Submission Radio. How are you?
Yes, I'm great, and thanks for having me.
Oh, it's always our pleasure. Now, first question, just to kick things off. Just the other day in the office, we were playing EA UFC. Now, your character model in the game looks fantastic. We have to ask, have you had the chance to play the game as yourself and knock some people out?
No, I have not played the game, but of course on social media I've been reading about it. I've seen some pictures, great graphics. My character has a lot of abs, I've seen. I'm happy about that. Fortunately not be able to play it yet. I've just been focused on training and getting my own thing going in real life.
Well, speaking of real life, Alistair, your next opponent has been announced as Ben Rothwell. You'll be facing him at the UFC Fight Night 50 on September 5th. And when you were on Submission Radio last, you mentioned that you'd possibly like to fight Josh Barnett or Mark Hunt. Were you surprised that you got Ben Rothwell?
You know what? The heavyweight division is not that big. So for me, it's like whatever. You know, I just need to make sure that I'm ready for anybody and make some change. I'm not trying to get Rick Jackson's. I'm then out in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I just need to make sure that I'm 100%. And then theoretically, it doesn't really matter who I'm fighting. So.
And I was going to ask, tell us about some of the challenges that Ben Rothwell brings to the table in this fight.
I mean, he's a strong guy. Like, that's obviously something I got to watch out for. He's kind of well-rounded, although I wouldn't say that the submissions is something I have to watch out for. But, yeah, I mean, he's got his wrestling, he's got his banging, his striking. He's heavy, he's big, he's strong, he's more heavy than I am. So, yeah, that's something I have to watch out for. But I'm going to make sure I'm ready.
Now, Alistair, last time you were on our show, you mentioned that you slimmed down because there were no more huge heavyweights in the UFC, such as Brock Lesnar or Shane Carwin. Now, Ben Rothwell, however, is a huge dude. Will we be seeing a big Overeem in the fight, or will you be going for more speed and agility and cardio in this one?
Well, I mean, I'm eyeing the title, and title fights are 5-round fights. And even if you're not even fighting for the title, you're fighting main events. Right, so you got to be ready for that 5-rounder, and cardio is one of the key components. So I've just been focusing on my job, on what is important, and strength, of course, is important. But even when you lose a couple pounds, I'm still just as strong.
Of course,
it does matter.
I was going to ask you also. You posted a picture recently on Twitter. You looked very lean. I think you might have been standing next to one of the trainers at the gym. Just out of curiosity for all the fans, how much are you weighing these days?
I just that train is very muscular. That's just a joke. I'm at 250 now.
Oh, awesome.
And, you know, I think people went crazy when that photo went online because obviously you're such an icon in MMA. Just address the rumors right now because people are going crazy on forums and internet all over the world. You're not planning on going back down to light heavyweight at any point in your career, are you, Alistair?
No, I like to eat. I like to be big. I like to be And to be honest, I can't even make it 205. You know, that would be unhealthy. So, no 205 for me anymore.
Awesome. And
people are jumping off buildings right now.
Now, Alistair, it's no secret that you've been training at Jackson Winkeljohn's. Tell us, how's the training been so far, and what's the vibe like?
Well, chemistry in the team has been amazing. You know, I'm learning every day. I get along with everybody. It's just really mellow, and everybody's just being themselves. There's no egos in the gym. That's what the coaches make sure of. Leave your ego outside, and you know, it works. I'm there every day. I'm learning, developing, just focusing on what's important, and that's the thing. When egos are involved, you know, that's where the focus is at. When there's no egos, you just focus on training and having a great time. So I'm very happy I made a decision, and also see if Albuquerque is a great place. I mean, people are so friendly, it's very open. It kind of reminds me of back in Holland. Back in Europe,
wow.
Very laid, but not flashy at all. And I mean, the city is a little bit slow, can be a little bit boring in the sense of there's not that much to do. But perfect. Keep focus on what is important. And that's training and winning fights.
Very well said, Alistair. Now, Coach Wink is one of our favorite guys in MMA. He's one of our favorite coaches. He's been on the show a whole bunch of times, and he's actually spoken to us a couple of times about being excited to have you a part of the team and being excited to work with you. What's it like to work with the infamous Coach Winkeljohn, and have you enjoyed it so far?
Yeah, all the coaches put something on the table, and again, I'm just, very enthusiastic. I'm learning every day, and yeah, again, I like the vibe. It's just been great, and it's also welcomed me with open arms. So it really was not complicated. It was just very easy, and I just went with the flow. And yeah, again, I'm very curious, and I have a lot of good stuff to work with here. So for me, it's been great. Jon Jones was the gym, came in the gym yesterday for his upcoming fight with Gustafsson, and worked with him a little bit. Also a very humble guy, even though he's champion, he's destroying everybody. Very good guy to work with, well-rounded, good techniques. So I'm looking forward to work with him more in the future. But the whole crew, everybody's just great.
And obviously with the Gustafsson fight, that's another big one that everyone's looking forward to. Have you been helping Jon Jones prepare for that one? Have you been mimicking Gustafsson or anything like that?
No, but it was his first training, and he was getting into the hang of things. And me too, just vibing a little bit. Of course, I'll offer my services if he needs me moving forward. I'll be there for him. And I think I'll train him. I'll definitely train him for this fight.
Oh, well, that's great. We had John Dodson on our show, maybe about a couple of months ago, and he says that he spars with the likes of Andrei Arlovski. So have you had an opportunity to spar with some of the lighter weight classes at the gym, or is it more of a case where heavyweights sort of spar with heavyweights? Because we've heard that a lot of the lightweights spar with heavyweights as well at the gym.
Yeah, sometimes they mix it up. I trained with Donald Cerrone, Cowboy. He was sharp, man, before his fight, and looking at that fight, that was just hard work. So I sparred with him a little bit, but, you take it easy. You're not going to really fight. You just spar, and you develop, and you play around a little bit. So that's a little bit what it's been like.
And also, just quickly, Alistair, we wanted to get your opinion. With Jon Jones, obviously, he's been talking about at some point in the future going to heavyweight, much like yourself, who started off as a light heavyweight, going to heavyweight. Have you had the chance to sort of, obviously, when you spar Jon, what do you think about his chances of going to move up to heavyweight? How do you think he'll do?
Well, I mean, he's a big guy. He's like my length, but a little bit thinner. Lighter a little bit, but of course he makes all the chance in the world. He's already very advanced. He's champion light heavyweight, so of course he's gonna do good in the heavyweight. I mean, like I said, the heavyweight division is not that stacked. So for him to enter would be an amazing thing, and I think he'll be great. And he's a big guy. He can go to heavyweight whenever he wants, and I'm sure he's gonna do great. I mean, he's very creative, and I see him already beating a lot of heavyweights as is now. So he can go whenever he wants. But there's still a couple of challenges left for him in the light heavyweights. I mean, his upcoming fight with Gustafsson will be very exciting. And then after that, Cormier is coming, the dark horse. So plenty of challenges for him before he comes up there. But eventually it's going to happen.
Okay. Speaking of Jon Jones, you recently signed with Malachi Kawa's management team, First Round Management. FRM, of course, manages Jon Jones and Carlos Condor, Tara Woodley, Thiago Alves. Funny enough, Frank Mir as well. What was the main reason you chose to align yourself with Malachi and the team?
Well, first of all, you need to have management. So we just sat down, came to an agreement. And for me, it's just all about you need to have management. So I want to have the best management. And who better than the best fighters on the planet, right? And I'm also training with the best fighters. So that's not that complicated to imagine why I signed with First Round Management.
And just quickly, sorry to cut in, Dennis. Obviously, being with First Round Management, you're training at Jackson Winkeljohn camp. Do you feel like you finally found a home for yourself? And do you see yourself being aligned with both the teams for the foreseeable future?
Well, I feel great. I'm developing every day, but I'm not going to be baited into false sense of security. You always have to be sharp and always have to want to improve and I always have to look for it, but I can say that at the moment I'm feeling very confident, very comfortable, and as long as I feel this way, there's no need to change anything. So So far, so good. So far, so great.
So far, so great. Absolutely. Well said. Now, Junior Dos Santos is a matchup that you've spoke of before, and I think everybody's obsessed with this fight because it's probably one of the biggest fights to make in the heavyweight division right now. Now, you've mentioned that after Ben, now, not overlooking Ben, but after Ben, you'd be open to possibly fighting Junior. Is he still someone who's on your radar? Because I believe that a lot of heavyweights are focusing on you right now because you're, obviously one of the biggest heavyweights in the division.
Yes, he's definitely somebody on the list. I could see myself definitely fighting him after this fight. I'm just coming off of a surgery, so it wouldn't make sense to, because I just had 11 hours on the table and both elbows fixed, something that was bothering me for a while, and actually up until a point that I couldn't even train anymore. So now I'm 100% again. I'm still recovering from the surgery, but I'm the outlook is 100%. And then GDS is definitely a fight that I want to make happen.
And also, Alistair, just for some of the fans who don't know, I believe, you did have issues with your elbows. I read somewhere that it was your leg as well. Tell us about what exactly happened with your injuries.
Bone spurs, both elbows. It's just wear and tear because I've been training for 20 years now. And one of those bone spurs entrapped my ulnar nerve, which is a pain.
I wanted to ask you also and get a bit of your perspective. Obviously, your future goal will be to hold the UFC heavyweight title. Now, at that moment, the title belongs to Cain Velasquez, who will be versing Fabricio Werdum. Fabricio is someone that you've versed twice before. How do you see that fight going between Cain and Fabricio?
Well, it's hard to predict because Cain is a tough bastard, but then Fabricio is a tricky bastard. And it can go both ways. I just don't know. Cain doesn't fight that often, so it's hard to gauge his improvement level. And Fabricio is improving all the time. I fought him twice. I kind of know him well. Clever fighter, intelligent fighter. Persistent, wants to win. I see that fight. I'm going to go lightly for Cain. 60-40 for Cain. 60-40 for Cain. But don't rule out Fabricio. Many times people are ruling out, and every time he keeps crawling back. He's tough, like a cockroach.
and obviously, if Fabricio wins, that would set up a great rematch between you two, a third matchup, and that would be great, wouldn't it?
It definitely would. It definitely would. But still, I think Cain should get him 60-40 for Cain. But I would like to for the title. And on my own personal goals, I definitely do see a UFC title one cup. It's been a little bit of a rough time, a lot of changes. Changes is never good. Usually changes are for the better, but in my case it wasn't. So, now everything's kind of settled down. Definitely seeing a new title one come.
Absolutely, and changes are always difficult. My girlfriend's always moving the couch around in the apartment, and it's hard for me to handle. But I was going to say, if you do fight Cain Velasquez, obviously, we all watch Cain. You mentioned it's hard to gauge what he's like. Do you when you watch him fight, though, do you compare yourself to him? Do you think about how you'd approach the puzzle that is Cain Velasquez if you did get a title match with him very soon?
Everybody has weaknesses, and I focus on the guy in front of me. That's Ben Rothwell at the time.
Absolutely.
But so let's keep focus where it needs to be, and when the focus gets on Cain or whoever, then we're going to talk about that.
Awesome. And also, just out of curiosity, Alistair, training at the famous Jackson Winkeljohn's, you're obviously there with some of your older opponents, like Travis Browne and Frank Mir. Tell us what that's been like training with those guys.
Well, Travis kind of still is banged up from his last fight we were doing, so I've not had the pleasure to train with him yet. I did see him in the gym briefly, spoke a little bit, so that was all positive. And Mir, I don't believe Mir is training here anymore. We've been texting a little bit back and forth, but he's based in Vegas, and I believe he's just working out with that. And I don't even know if he's what his next fight is going to be like, or what's the next one.
Now, Alistair, as it will be no secret to you, you've got a lot of fans out there, and when we told them that you were coming on the show, obviously they posted their questions. So we'd like to ask you a couple of the questions from the fans, if that's okay.
Yes, go ahead, bud. Keep it short.
Sorry?
Bud, keep it short because I want to go to theme park, and I have friends waiting for me right now.
Not a problem. We'll definitely let you go to theme park. So just quickly, Fred Fouch, do you miss pure kickboxing? Watching all of your episodes of the Reem, you seem really happy during your run at the top of K1.
I do. I kind of miss K1 because that was special to me. Shame its history is not there anymore. But I'm very happy training and fighting MMA.
Now, AW 9000 Plus would like to know, when you competed in K1 and Strikeforce, you protected your chin by keeping your hands close to your face, but in the UFC, you would often bring your hands lower to your waist. Is this a result of having to worry more about takedowns, and have you considered returning more to a striking defensive posture like in K1?
It just depends on who you're fighting. Who you're fighting, what his strong points are, what you expect him to do. And, everybody got to make up their own decision what they train, what they do.
And just another question from the fans in regard to your fighting style. Here's another big one. With a high guard in kickboxing, from where you often protected yourself and land counters, while that dynamic is different with the smaller MMA gloves, do you think that the gloves make a big difference?
Makes somewhat of a difference, yes. Somewhat of a difference. You should not. You shouldn't walk around with the hands for the head because you're not going to see, obviously. But there's a time and place for everything, I would say, and that is for everybody for themselves to figure out. There are no rules. That's one thing I learned in MMA. Anything is possible. Anything that is effective is possible. So, and with that mindset, just figure it out for yourself. What works for you? What works best? And even though it changes all the time too. Sometimes this works, sometimes that works. Then you have some guys are fat, some guys are skinny. So there's a lot of some guys are big heads, some guys are small. So everything is different for everyone. Figure it out for yourself. Watch tape, talk to your trainers, read a book, think about it logically, and try it out.
Very, very poetically said, Alistair, and we really appreciate the time that you're giving us. Now, we have a quick round of tap out, a quick tap out round to do. If that's okay, I'll just take another couple of minutes, or we throw some questions at you, and you just give us the first thing that pops to your head. Okay? So, are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. One more minute. All right, here we go. Dizzy, would like to know, what's your favorite Celine Dion song?
Celine Dion, who is that?
Well said.
Very
good
question. Now, Alistair, if you never became an MMA fighter or kickboxer, what would you have done for a living?
That's a good question. I'll answer it very positively. I'll probably be special forces.
Alistair, have you had a chance to cook anyone a horse meat dish yet over there in Albuquerque?
No.
Now, Alistair, with all the horse meat that you've consumed, do you ever fear that an evil horse assassin will come after you in the middle of the night?
Nah.
Alistair, you were over in Australia, did a great seminar for Everything MMA. How did you enjoy being in the country, and are the women here in the top 3 in the world for you?
It was great, and actually on top of that, I'm actually planning to come back. So planning for this November to be back in Australia, be there like a month or so. So we'll be traveling around doing a bunch of seminars all over the place. And also I want to go to Stereosonic Festival. Heard some great things about that. A lot of Dutch party DJs that will be spinning there. So we're planning a nice trip to back to Australia, see the country, meet a lot of people, do the seminar, shake a lot of hands, and just spend more time there. My time was very pleasant there. Good food, very open people. So looking forward to come back this November.
Awesome, awesome. Well, obviously, everyone in Australia would love to have you over at Alistair, and Stereosonic's a whole bunch of fun, so that would be great as well. Guys, you can follow him at Alistair Overeem on Twitter. Check him out at alistairovereem.com, and of course, look out for the Reem documentary. That thing is absolutely awesome, very informative, and a great look at obviously Alistair Overeem's life and everything there. Alistair, thank you so much for being on the show. We really appreciate your time.
By the way, new episode will be coming soon. Couple more days, new episode of the Reem. So keep your eyes for that. It's going to be on the website, alistair.com.
Yeah, we'll obviously retweet that so that everybody can see it. Again, Alistair, thanks so much for being on the show. We appreciate your time.
Hey, thank you for having me, and maybe see you in November.
Oh,
absolutely,
definitely.
We'd love to.
Yeah, man. See you in November.
Well, we can't wait to see Alistair in November. Maybe we'll go to Stereosonic with him. I feel like it could be a good time. So, I know Ariel Helwani does the thing where he goes around the city with the fighters. Imagine submission radio with Alistair Overeem at Stereosonic, showing him the ropes.
That would be interesting. For starters, we'd probably have to start casual bodybuilding if we're going to go to Stereosonic. Then we'd have to buy a Louis Vuitton bum bag. So that will be interesting. I think Alistair Overeem would actually blend in pretty well in Stereosonic. There's a lot of big dudes going there. So yeah, not many. I think Alistair will probably be the only guy going there for the music. But anyway, it'll be good to see him in November. Hopefully, he'll teach us a couple of things and some street science.
Well, I was going to say that I've already got one thing sorted. You know, I've got those Louis Vuitton bum bags ready. So now we just got to get into shape, which I suppose is the hard part. But either way, it was good to have a chat with Alistair, and you know, just a really interesting guy, and one of those guys that really has a stigma about him in MMA. So always a pleasure to have him on the show. And for all the Aussies listening out there, he did come down to Australia last year with Everything MMA, of course. As mentioned before on the show, they are bringing Diego Sanchez down in August on the 15th and 17th in Perth and Melbourne. You guys can check out all the information at www.everythingmma.com.au. And Casper, we have a bit of an announcement for next week's show. We've got a guest confirmed, a big name. Yeah. Who is it? Who is it?
Drum roll ready. Diego Sanchez himself will be on the show. He will be on Submission Radio. We will be chatting to the man. A lot to talk to him about. I mean, not to get ahead of ourselves about the Dublin card, but he did get called out at this past UFC in Dublin. So we want to chat to him about what he thinks about that and just a whole bunch of things. And as always, we always welcome the fans to send in their questions. Send them in, as well as your MMA moments for our Facebook timeline. Send them all into submissionradioaustralia@gmail.com. Any questions you have for Diego Sanchez, I mean, he's a good guy, he's a man of the people. He will be more than happy to answer them, and we'll be more than happy to ask them.
That's right. We'll be hanging with Diego when he comes to Australia. Make sure to check out the video when that happens. And as Casper said, you know, doing something different, turning over our timeline to the listeners. We want to know all about your special moments, and we want them to be a part of our Facebook page. Because let's be honest, you know, you guys make the show what it is, and you know, we love interacting with you guys and hearing what you guys think. So, you know, Cass, speaking of interactive crowds and listeners, UFC Dublin, I mean, from the weigh-ins to the event, I don't know if I've ever seen a crazier crowd than the crowd in Ireland.
Yeah, this was insane. I mean, we saw that video with Errol Helwani going around roaming the streets. The fans in Ireland are insane, much like the Aussies. I mean, Ireland, it's been said a million times, they really are a fighting nation between the whiskey and beating people up, you know. I mean, the fighting Irish, it really says it all. And what's crazy about this, Dennis, is that this is a Fight Pass card. This wasn't on Fox. This wasn't a pay-per-view. This is a Fight Pass card. But it really had that big fight feel, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Look, I looked at Dana White's face during the weigh-ins, and you could see the guy was looking at Conor McGregor like, all right, I'm just looking at money right now. The guy is just charisma wrapped in Brad Pitt from Snatch. I mean, the fact of the matter is the guy's a bona fide star. It's just something, you know, guys are born with, and Conor really does have that. And I suppose a lot of stuff was riding for the UFC on this fight, because obviously if Conor lost the fight against Diego Brandao, then sort of the hype trains derailed, and we'll talk about that fight later. So it definitely felt like there was a little bit of pressure there, but I think Diego Brandao, not exactly on the same level as Conor McGregor at this point.
Yeah, I would agree. We'll talk about that fight a little bit further on, but just quickly, because we are running out of time, we're going to run through the prelims and then off to the main card. So obviously, kicking off the UFC Fight Night in Dublin, the curtain jerkers were Patrick Houlihan and Josh Samper. Now, this is an awesome fight. Just quickly on a side note, I don't think I've ever seen a crowd this loud and into it in the first prelim. I mean, nowadays, even in Australia, you know, people sort of start strolling in. We've got great fans, but as far as you know, decibels, this was insane. Patrick Houlihan, of course, fantastic submission, rear naked choke. He really snuck that in. Very high intensity, high pace in that fight, and you know, Josh Sampo's no joke. Moving on afterwards, you had the light heavyweights, Nikita Al Capone Krylov. He decided that his nickname was just going to be someone else's name, against Cody Donovan. Brutal TKO late in the first round. Then we had the middleweights, Trevor Smith versus Tor Trong. I really like Tor Trong, but didn't have enough for Trevor today. And Trevor basically beat him decision, unanimous, 29-28. Middleweights, Cathal Pendra. This guy has a lot of hype, and this guy could possibly be a future Conor McGregor. He defeated Mike King. Now, things didn't go Cathal's way, but he did, in the end, get a technical submission. He was copping a beating at the start, and he did end up putting Mike King to sleep. In the flyweights, you had Neil Two-Tap Siri defeating Phil Harris. And just quickly, I really like Neil Siri. He did fight Brad Pickett in his last fight, and he really gave Brad a run for his money. Unfortunately, he didn't get the nod that night, but tonight he did put himself in the win column in the flyweight division. And it's another good Irishman getting the win, and it's good for the flyweight division. Then you had the strongman Ilir Latifi in the light heavyweight division defeating Chris Dempsey really early on, really poured it on, brutal TKO. And I've been a fan of Ilir before he even came to the UFC, before he fought Gegard Mousasi and stepped up like a champion on short notice. And the Black Zillions have a nickname for him, and it was Strongy. He's a really, really strong dude and a good wrestler, and I'm very curious to see what he can do in the light heavy division in the UFC.
There you go, guys. So yeah, the prelims obviously, kicked the event off with a bang, and people were loving it. Before the main event, even the main card even started. I just think, just on a side note, I just think everything went right with this event. I mean, the fights were exciting, especially, as you mentioned, the prelim fights had a lot of great action. The crowd was into it. It almost felt like you were watching a big pay-per-view event. Like, it just had a big event feel when I was watching it. Did you feel the same, Cass?
I would 100% agree. You could easily forget that this was a Fight Pass card. It was pretty insane. Yeah, can't say enough about the Irish fans, and no surprises there. And I think there was, four or five Irish guys on that card. I mean, even when the UFC comes down to Australia, there's not always necessarily that many Aussies. In America, it's not a surprise. In Brazil, it's not a surprise. In Canada, it's no surprise. But, this was one night where there was a lot of Irish guys, and it was a clean sweep. The Irish really proved that they do have a pool of talent. And Dana White was saying how, they're not necessarily the mecca of fighting, but they've really proved that there's a lot of guys, up and coming. And I think MMA is going to have that second explosion in the UK. And just fun fact, I remember seeing an interview prior to the event. I do apologize, I forget the guy's name. It was a great interview with Dana White where they mentioned about how, in a lot of games at football, I think in Seattle, they have one of those machines that records the decibels and how loud the crowd goes. They did bring one in for this one, and it actually reached 111 decibels during the main event. So it's officially the loudest UFC event ever. Of course, it's the first time they've actually tested the crowd, but still, it just goes to show what the Irish fans are made of.
Absolutely. Now, going into the main card, we had Naoki Kotani versus Norman Park. Obviously, Norman Park, a member of the Ultimate Fighter, UK versus Australia, did really well on the show and has been doing really well in the UFC ever since. Cass, what did you think about this fight?
This is a great fight. I think this fight was, to a degree, Norman Park's coming out party. I mean, Katani's a guy, he's a very good grappler. Of course, Norman Park's got his judo background, but Katani does have the ability to make guys look really bad and have those grinding out fights. And Norman Park really poured it on. He really outclassed him and gave him a brutal TKO. I think that fight probably could have been stopped a little bit earlier, but can't say enough good things about Norman Park in his performance. And after the fight, he called out Diego Sanchez, who, as we said previously, will be on Submission Radio next weekend. So we can't wait to ask Diego Sanchez what he thinks about that call out. Would he want to fight Norman Park, possibly on the Mexico card? But I think very smart decision by Norman Park. I mean, calling out a guy like Diego Sanchez. Some people said, why not Michael Johnson? Well, Michael Johnson's a great fighter, but he doesn't have the name value that Diego does. So maybe he thinks he can take advantage of Diego if they fight.
An interesting TKO sort of coming out of nowhere in the end. Katani was going for a leg. Park stood up, spun out, and before he could secure a leg lock position, Park lowered his level, picked the ankle. He completed another takedown against the fence. And this is where, he rained down the punches and the TKO came. I don't know if I really expected the TKO to come that easily from that position. But, Park looks like he improved so much since we first saw him in The Ultimate Fighter. I definitely think a possible matchup with him and Diego Sanchez is very interesting and a lot more likely than Luke Bunnott calling out Wanderlei Silva. But we can talk about that later.
Next up in the flyweight division, we had Ian Uncle Creepy McCall against Brad Pickett. I was really happy, but I was really happy to see Ian McCall get the win. I think a few times he did get robbed. Earlier on, obviously there was that fight against Demetrius Johnson in Australia, where due to a technical error where someone didn't tally up the scorecards correctly, it was basically said that Demetrius Johnson won the fight when in fact it should have been a draw and should have gone into overtime. So good to see Ian McCall getting back in the win column. He was just too much for Brad Pickett. This is Brad's second fight in the flyweight division, dropping down from bantamweight. Fun fact, obviously Brad Pickett, he has beaten Demetrius Johnson in the past, so that was sort of his claim to fame in the flyweight division, that if he can rattle off a couple of wins, he could be a contender and have that rematch with Demetrius Johnson, but Ian McCall stopped him there. In all honesty, Dennis, I think Brad was way too flat-footed. He planted his feet too much, and he was very content to just outbox Ian McCall. He didn't set up any combinations, didn't use his jab, which for a guy like Ian McCall, who really just darted in and out, a lot of lateral movement, it's not something that you want to do.
I absolutely agree with you, Cass. And, the takedown was there all night for Ian. He did a fantastic job. Looked really great, and I believe he dedicated that fight to his passed away teammate, Shane Del Rosario. Before the fight even happened, though, Ian McCall, Mr. Uncle Creepy himself, retweeted a sexy picture that Submission Radio put up. Of course, we're talking about equality for ring man all over the world. It was a sexy little picture of him holding up one of the ring cards. But it was a really great fight for Ian, and it's great to see that he's in such a good place, in such good shape. Obviously had some issues with some personal problems, and it's great to see that he's past all that, and he just looked amazing. Look, Brad Pickett, like you said, was very flat-footed. And you know what? Just looking at the two guys, I know Brad cut down from a higher weight class, but Ian looked bigger than him during the fight, I thought. So I don't know. I don't know if this is the right weight class for Brad. Maybe it takes too much out of him to get down to the division. But Ian McCall was definitely, like you said, a lot lighter on his feet, in and out, and just executed the perfect game plan. A big win for Ian McCall.
Yeah, I know Brad Pickett did say that it was a hard weight cut, even if his previous one. I don't know if this one was any easier, but it is a lot of weight for him to cut. As far as cardio goes, I think he looked fine. He didn't look like he lacked anything in the cardio department, but you could visibly see how frustrated he was by about the mid of round 2. I think Ian McCall, really sort of exemplified what a mixed martial artist is. He had punches, kicks, a lot of movement, takedowns, whenever you could, and Brad Pickett was really content to just box and every now and then go for the takedown. So I think Ian McCall really did deserve the win here. I was honestly scared that he was going to be robbed by the judges with all the ridiculous decisions we saw previously. Good to see Ian McCall in the win column, and very happy for him that he could dedicate it to Shane Del Rosario. May he rest in peace. But next up in the welterweight division, you had there's another guy who had a lot of momentum coming into this fight, Gunnar Nelson against Zach Cummings. Now, what did you think of this fight?
Well, I'm a big Gunnar Nelson fan, and we're actually going to have him on the show, do a pre-record earlier in the week and put him on the show before his fight. Unfortunately, Gunnar didn't feel comfortable to come on the show at this point because it's so close to his fight. Look, Gunnar is such an unorthodox fighter. He's such an exciting fighter to watch. But Zach Cummings is a very big guy for the division. He's very, very strong. He's no slouch. And I felt like Gunnar Nelson looked great in this fight. However, there were a couple of times there where Zach kind of closed the distance a little bit, started throwing a few more strikes, and Gunnar looked a little bit timid in certain parts. But then, obviously, when he came out in round 2, he looked fantastic and finished Zach. What I'd like to see, though, is I'd like the UFC to take their time with Gunnar Nelson. I don't want him to throw him in with any big names just yet. I still think he needs a little bit of time for development. I think he's got a very interesting style, but I just see a lot of holes in that style as well that, some of the top 10 athletes in his weight class could take advantage of. And I suppose one of those styles is, his face is very open. It is possible to close the distance, even though he does have a very unorthodox stance. And, he's a little bit small for the division as well. So I still think he needs to, fine-tune his skill, match up against a few other, lower tier UFC fighters until he makes his way up, to the sort of upper echelon of the division. I don't think he should be rushed along. What did you think, Cass?
Well, I would agree with some of the things you said and disagree with others. I agree with you in the sense that Gunnar shouldn't be rushed along. I think he definitely needs to establish himself. I think knowing the UFC, they're probably going to throw him in with the Wolves really soon. I agree that he is quite small for the division. Now, he does have that natural Icelandic, Scandinavian strength. And considering that Zach Cummings used to be a light heavyweight and Gunnar was pushing him around, that only says good things for him. He's a fantastic grappler. Don't get me wrong, but there are wrestlers in the division that can take advantage of that. And I mean, as we've seen with Frank Mir, who has fantastic jiu-jitsu, you can't neglect your wrestling and expect to just submit guys off your back. With his fight, I think Gunnar. I don't know how impressed I was with Gunnar in the first round. I think he was a little bit disappointing there. He was very timid, and I think Zach Cummings definitely won that round. I don't know whether he shot Gunnar Nelson or Gunnar Nelson was still sort of, getting off to a slow start, but I think he was losing that fight up until he did get Zach with that submission. And, it was a nice one. He showed why he is a fantastic grappler and why he's teaching a lot of things to Conor McGregor. But I think, Gunnar Nelson wasn't as impressive as I expected him. So I think, they need to slow down with his opponents. Not that Zach Cummings was anything, too much too soon, but I would like to see him get a few more fights and get a little bit more experience. What did you think?
I agree with that. And, Zach Cummings didn't capitalize on a lot of opportunities that he had. There were a few moments there where Zach just looked really confused, and I think that's what Gunnar's style does to people. But I think that if there were some other people in Zach's position, they would have taken an opportunity, to really get in there and land a few punches and, really tag Gunnar and see what he's made of. So that's just some of the stuff that Gunnar's camp needs to take into consideration. Because if he is a slow starter, and in this fight he was a little bit of a slow starter, there is a opportunity there for fighters to break that distance down and land a good overhand, right or left over his chin, a good hook. That face is open. Once a punch does get thrown at Gunnar, he does this blocking motion with both of his hands, which can be timed really well, for some of the better strikers in the division. So if I'm Gunnar's corner right now, I'm just going to look at the fight, look at a couple of things that could be improved, and really sort of work on those things as Gunnar does move up the division. So, but overall, at least Gunnar won. Like you said, there was a point there where I thought Zach might pull this off after the first round. So I'm happy that Gunnar was able to win, and we're able to still sort of see this hype train move up the valley to wherever it's going next.
And just quickly, with Gunnar Nelson, he's got a very much, karate sort of style, karate stance. He needs to be careful not to fall in that Lyoto Machida trap where, Lyoto Machida is very patient, times things. Gunnar Nelson is very similar in the sense that he inches his way closer to his opponent, he sort of bounces on his feet, gets slowly and slowly closer, and then, he pulls off a strike. But if someone doesn't let him get closer and get his rhythm, he is open to a guy like Zach Cummings who wants to make the fight ugly, really take advantage of that, get him up against the fence, dirty box, and do things like that. So again, like you said, great win for Gunnar Nelson. I'm happy he moves on. He got the W, and I'm very curious to see what happens.
Yeah, and just on that Lyoto Machida thing, I almost feel like when I watch Gunnar, he's a little bit of a unevolved Lyoto Machida without sounding a bit rude. I think he's got a lot of great skills, but there's just certain red flags that I see. So like some of his footwork, sometimes he stands with both feet next to each other in certain positions, and that kind of stuff just can be really exploited by really strong wrestlers. So I just think he needs to mix in a few more styles or just work on a few aspects of his game, to really be ready for some of those other fighters like you mentioned.
Moving on now, the main event in more ways than one. Featherweights Conor McGregor, the son of Ireland, against Diego Brandão, who could not care less that he was in enemy territory. Dennis, what did you? The hype on this fight was crazy. Originally, it was supposed to be Cole Miller. That got scrapped. Diego stepped in. What did you think of this?
Oh man,
Dennis?
when Cole Miller pulled out of that fight, I was so devastated. I really wanted that fight to happen. But I'm happy Diego Brandão took the fight. And I mean, hats off to Diego Brandão. You go to a country like Ireland, everybody heard how loud the people were in the arena. Could you imagine what that's like, being in enemy territory? Everybody, there'd probably be a few comments. And mentally, it might be very difficult, but I know Diego said that it was very motivating for him in the gym. But before we even get to the fight, what about the entrance, Cass? I'm, of course, talking about Conor McGregor's entrance. When he was coming out to that arena, you know, you could think that this guy is one of the top MMA stars in the world. You could think that he's pretty much the top star in the world. The kind of reception he got, the kind of entrance he got, you know, how the music changed. What did you think of his entrance before we get to the fight?
Yeah, you know, as soon as the Irish music started playing and then the flags came out on this big screens with the UFC logo in front of them, that's when you knew, okay, the UFC are really, really investing in this guy. Not that you didn't know it before, but... And I noticed that when the UFC are going to other countries, they're really playing on those other countries. We saw with James Tahuna, you know, they were in New Zealand, they did the haka before James Tahuna came out, and obviously now they're in Ireland. They really took... what's the word? They took not advantage, but they took the opportunity and really ran with it. They knew the crowd would go crazy, and it will be no different than, you know, it's like when George Sotiropoulos was, you know, fighting the UFC, and it was UFC 110, and he would come out to AC/DC. Everybody would go crazy as well. So I like that the UFC are doing that. It's good for business, and it's everybody loves a good spectacle. There are other people that don't like the whole WWE feel to it. I think that's absolute bullshit. You know, people and fights are sold based on emotion, and the UFC did a tremendous job in that sense.
Yeah, you know, he came out, you felt like you were in a big fight. You know, it takes me back to, you know, the old school boxing days. He's walking through the crowd. The people are raw. You know, they're hungry. Everybody's nervous. There's this nervousness in the air. And, you know, the UFC, like you mentioned, just subtly puts that flag up. And it's not even, you know, sometimes there's huge pyros when people come out. But it was just that little subtle flag when it popped up. And you're like, all right, it's on. He's coming out. You know, I got chills. I got chills, and I don't get chills very often, you know, and I'm not the biggest Conor McGregor fan as well, but it was just that moment there when the fans were going crazy. I thought, you know, I was really proud of the UFC. I was really happy for MMA. You know, as an MMA fan, and, you know, you and me, MMA journalists, whenever something like that happens, it's always cool to see, you know, people getting that into the sport emotionally. And yeah, that really set the right mode and you know, the right feeling for the fight for me, which is a big thing for me, like mentally going into watching a fight. It's just setting the right tone. Now, Cass, the fight kicked off. What did you think? What did you think of the actual fight?
Yeah, I think there was a little bit of a feeling out process. One thing I noticed at the start was when Conor McGregor signaled to Diego Brandao, do you want to touch gloves? Diego said no. And then when I think there was a bit of a miscommunication because Conor McGregor came out like he was going to touch gloves. Diego touched, and then Conor McGregor went for, I think, a spinning back kick to the body. And I thought there was going to be a much bigger deal made out of that than there was. And it seemingly got swept under the rug. Not that I'm saying anything bad about Conor McGregor. I think it was more a miscommunication than anything. But, you know, towards the start, I mean, the guys, especially Conor McGregor, he's throwing a lot of spins, a lot of wild kicks. It seems like he was getting his groove back on. Let's not forget the guy had ACL surgery. He was out for quite a long time. And I was very curious to see if ring rust would affect him. Now, he did win the fight. He got Diego in the first round. That's impressive to knock Diego Brandao out in the first round. And this isn't a Diego Brandao that stepped up on short notice. This is a very focused, in-shape Diego Brandao. And for Conor McGregor to knock him out in the first round, very impressive. But I think the jury is still out on Conor McGregor. Was I impressed? Yes. Would I call him the next featherweight champion or contender? Not yet. I think there's still a lot of things that he needs to prove. He showed us that he can strike and he can knock people out. And I mean, he defended some takedowns, but, you know, Diego Brandao, last time I checked, he didn't compete in the NCAA and he wasn't a Division I wrestling champion. So big ups to Conor McGregor, but honestly, I'm already excited to see what his next test is. What did you think?
Yeah, you know, I agree with you. You know, it's definitely not, even I believe Cole Miller was a bigger test than Diego Brandao, just basically because, you know, Cole's just such a stud on the ground, and, you know, I guess that hatred or whatever, we wanted to see what Cole could do, and obviously I'm a bit of a Cole Miller fan, but there were a couple of moments there when McGregor did get tapped in the face, you know. And Brandao did throw a few good punches at him. And then there was that moment when McGregor, you know, landed a couple of good strikes and Brandao sort of wilted. Now, usually Brandao doesn't really, you know, mentally, you know, shut down in a fight so soon. But I just think that crowd yelling, going crazy, the whole scenario, it's very tough mentally. And I mean, it would have been tough for Diego. There were some up kicks from Brandao that could have really done some damage. You know, McGregor was sort of having a little bit of trouble getting around that guard. If I was Brandao, I would have tried to get up. I know he wanted to show off some of his jiu-jitsu off his back, and he threw up a few attacks. He threw up a few leg locks. Well, he tried to go for a couple of leg locks. I'm not sure if that was the wisest decision. Overall, I'm excited to see, like you said, what happens to McGregor next. And this is another guy that I don't think needs to be rushed along too soon. In MMA, a lot of fighters don't get, brought up slowly. They get the big fights straight away. And I'd like to see, McGregor fight a whole bunch of guys before he fights for the title. I think that way it would make it more exciting, and it just makes more sense if you match him up with guys that, have less chance of beating him. You can, keep that name value up. You can still make big fights, and there's a lot of guys in the division, that really want to fight him. So there's a lot of genuine, rivalries that he can compete in before he does go for that title.
Yeah, I would agree. I think here's the thing. I think when Conor McGregor won, the UFC and everybody in there sighed a big sigh of relief. And you mentioned the movie Snatch before, and if you remember that part where Brad Pitt knocks that guy out, and Jason Statham's like, now we're fucked. And I think, if Conor McGregor did lose that fight, it would have been one of those moments. All that hype, all those possible rivalries and things like that in the division would have been out the window, much like the Anderson Silva-Jon Jones fight. In this case, there's a lot of guys who in the division want to tear Conor McGregor apart, and he'd more than happily welcome them. So in terms of the UFC's position and from a promotional standpoint, the world is their oyster. There's so many fights to make up for Conor McGregor, and I agree with what you're saying. I don't think they should rush. I think they should bring him up slowly, let him gain experience. I don't think he's too many fights away from a title shot, but let's be honest, he hasn't fought anyone in the top 10. And also on Diego Brandia, while he's a good fighter and he's dangerous, he can finish guys. He has been knocked out quite a few times in his career, so. It's just another thing to say about, Conor McGregor and beating Diego. I think Diego Brandia, he has quit in the past. He has been knocked out. So Conor McGregor did what he said he did. And sometimes when guys are that confident in what they're doing, much like a Chris Weidman, it's very interesting to see where it takes them.
So let's say you're a matchmaker and you couple of matches that you'd like to see Conor McGregor in next. Who do you think you'd choose for him to fight next? I guess that's the big puzzle, really. We had Dennis Bermudez on the show just before. I think Dennis Bermudez versus Conor McGregor would be a great fight. That's a big test, though, for Conor McGregor. And, it could go either way. Dennis Bermudez, if he does beat Clay Guida, is a very dangerous opponent. But who do you think he should fight after this one?
If Dennis Bermudez beats Clay Guida, I think he's a lot closer to the title shot than Conor McGregor. That would be 7 in a row for Dennis Bermudez. Having said that, Conor McGregor, I think he's still a big test for anyone. I would say that'd be a good fight for Dennis Bermudez because it would definitely put his name out there. He's a guy he's got a big win streak. A lot of people don't know about him. If not Dennis Bermudez, I would say Dustin Poirier would be a great fight.
That's a good one. Yeah, that's a tough one though. That's one that McGregor might find himself losing, isn't it?
Yeah, I would say so. Poirier, the Diamond has really been on a run. He's really found himself. I think that would be a really tough fight for McGregor. And if McGregor wins, then I think he's very close to a title shot. Because, like I said, the Diamond is no joke. They both beat Diego Brandia in their last fights. There's already a Twitter beef between them. They're both down. Conor McGregor wants to fight him. Dustin Poirier wants to fight him. And Conor McGregor was saying how Dustin Poirier doesn't want to fight Conor McGregor, because, obviously Cole Miller trains with him, and when Conor McGregor was basically saying that when Cole Miller pulled out, everybody in his camp would have known before, they would have been the first to know, but no one stepped up. Dustin Poirier, he didn't have a fight lined up, and his question was, why didn't he step up to fight Conor McGregor? It's obviously because he doesn't want to fight it. Well, Dustin Poirier's agreed to the fight, and I think as far as matchmakers go, that's probably the obvious one to make.
Absolutely. So an exciting night there in UFC Dublin. What did you think about Luke Barnett trying to call out Wanderlei Silva in the post-fight press conference? So it wasn't the post-fight press conference. It was just a press conference scrum. What do you think of that matchup? Do you think that matchup makes sense?
I don't know that it does, to be honest. I like Luke Barnett. I really do, and I think he's got a lot of promise. Look, if Wanderlei fights him, that, as far as big names, that would be a very small name for Wanderlei. I don't know if Luke Barnett has proven himself enough. He lost his last fight, to be honest. I thought he won it. Me personally, I think he got robbed. But as far as the scorecards go, he did officially lose it. I don't know if he's ready for Wanderlei. He's basically saying that because he's younger and Vanderlei is older and he's on the way down. Here's the thing. I mean, Vanderlei, I want to see him back in the octagon, but he's not even close to getting licensed. So I'm not really sure why anyone's calling Vanderlei out. And the other thing is, yeah, as far as Luke Barnett goes, I think he might be trying to pull a Brendan Schwab and call out some legends to get his name out there.
Yeah, good stuff, Luke, but there's no chance that fight should happen. I mean, Vanderlei's only got a few fights left if he does come back. And I think a lot of the fans want to see him matched up with a couple of other legends before his career runs out. I mean, I don't think Vanderlei is going to be going for a title. So I think we want to see a couple of matchups with a couple of big names before he leaves, or if we don't get to see him again, I guess that's a lot of fans that lose out on seeing Vanderlei fight. And I remember when you and me went up to Sydney for UFC 110, we met Wand in person. He was one of the nicest guys I think that we've ever met. Just such a great guy. We got to see him do his thing at the weigh-in with Michael Bisping, and it was just an amazing experience. So just from a fan standpoint, I hope this whole thing gets figured out, and I hope we get to see him in the octagon at least another time, at least one more time, before he calls it quits.
Absolutely. And you mentioned, just sort of on a final note, you mentioned when we went up to UFC 110 in Sydney, that was a big moment for us, as far as UFC fans. First time UFC was in Australia. And what we're doing on our Facebook at the moment, we want your moments, your MMA moments. What's something that happened in your life, whether you went to an event, you watched an event, you're a pro MMA fighter that's a little bit lesser known, an amateur fighter, whatever the case is, we want your events. So send them into submissionradioaustralia@gmail.com, where we will publish them on our Facebook timeline. That way you can be a part of history forever.
That's right. And don't forget to include the date, your photo, so your face could be up on our page, and also what happened. And also, Cass, next week we'll be taking questions from the fans. So if you have a question for us, if you just like to see us talk about a subject, if you have a question for, me or Cass about anything in MMA or the world in general, send us your questions to submissionradioaustralia@gmail.com. We'll give you full credit on the show, and who knows, you might even be on it. So send us all your questions, and we'll be happy to answer them.
Yeah, so it's good to be back, guys. Another big weekend in the MMA world, and it's going to be another big one next week. Don't forget, we got Diego Sanchez and a whole bunch of other guests. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like it, check it out on Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, and iTunes. And till then, guys, that's us for another week.
Take care.